I live in the deep woods of southern Missouri. The nearest civilization outside of a trailer house down the road is a gas station town a couple of miles away. I've lived here since I was 6 months old and spent most of my days in the woods. I don't remember a time where I didn't know the winding paths and clearings like the back of my hand. There were always stories of something in the woods. In fact, a local tribesman told a tale of a spirit that wandered the woods at night. When he told me, I was deeply invested in stories of ghosts and monsters and that sort of stuff, so the tribesman's tale was pretty run-of-the-mill. I didn't think much of it until a few years ago. One night, around 2010, I was walking the usual trail and got a feeling that something wasn't right. It was like I was walking 3 feet behind my body. It took the sound of a snapping branch to bring my body and mind back together. But it wasn't a twig or a small limb. It was a large oak branch about as wide as me. It hit the ground with a hard thud. After that, the woods became completely silent. No owls or coyotes howling, not even the night breeze. The only sound was my stunned breathing. Then, out of the darkness from the shadows, 2 glowing eyes looked directly at me. And what made this even more terrifying was, they were really far down the trail, but somehow they were several feet off the ground. Then I heard a low, thundering growl come from that direction. I don't know how to describe it, but it was like the growl of a tiger mixed with a bear. I wanted to run back home, but my legs just wouldn't budge. I started to panic, and my breathing picked up and became more and more like gasping for air. Then, as quick as it started, the growling stopped, because the creature started to turn around and go deeper into the woods. That's when I got to see its true form under the moonlight. When I got a good look at it, it didn't seem of this world. I can only describe it as a black mountain lion with the head and body of a grizzly bear. It looked like it hadn't eaten in a month. It was nothing more than skin and bones. Only when I was alone in the woods would my legs let me sprint back home and lock myself in my room with a survival knife. I'm safe now, but occasionally, on the quietest nights of the year, I can hear it outside my window, and those same piercing yellow eyes from that night appear out of the darkness. I never go outside without my knife anymore, even during the day. I've had several friends come over and visit for the day, just to tell me when they leave that they felt like someone was watching them from the outside. The first time I heard the rustling outside at night, I didn't think anything of it. My back garden joins onto a thin strip of woodland that runs along the length of the quiet suburban street where I've lived for the past 5 years. And it isn't uncommon for the local cats to prowl around in there after dark in search of rodents and other prey. It wasn't until I was standing at my back door late one Friday night in June, after the sun had long since gone down, that I heard something that made my skin crawl. As I was smoking a cigarette, tuned into the typical ambience of distant crickets and the occasional passing car, a peculiar sound drew my attention past the perimeter of my garden and into the woods beyond. It was slight, as if stifled, and in the moment, I half attributed it to my own weariness following a long and particularly hot day. But then, I heard it again. A cough, like someone was subtly clearing their throat. It couldn't have been the neighbors. All the adjacent homes were in the utter darkness with their windows firmly closed. Besides, it was obvious that the sound had come from right ahead of me. Literally, it couldn't have been more than 20 feet away, maybe 10 into the bush beyond my small backyard. Tentatively, I called out, feeling like an idiot for being afraid of some obscure sound that logically was probably nothing more than a trick of the mind. But then, I heard rustling. Something big. I pulled my phone out and turned on the flashlight, aiming it into the overgrown woodland, and I slowly advanced to get a better look. The rustling became more frantic before it eventually broke into an undeniable run. The heavy footfalls gradually disappeared into the field beyond the woods, and I immediately went back inside and locked the door behind me. I didn't call the police. Instead, I spent the next hour or so convincing myself that I had imagined it all. or that a fox was prowling around, or whatever else I thought would make me feel less disturbed by it all. Eventually, it worked, and at some point in the night, I fell asleep. The next morning around 10, I decided to go and have a look for myself, if anything just to assuage the dread that hadn't entirely disappeared from my gut. However, that wasn't to be the case. Roughly 15 feet from my back gate, I discovered a large impression in the grass, as if something heavy had lain on top of it for a long time. Then, I found the first piece. A scraggly hood with netting and then thorny branches caught in the strands of a green, stringy fabric. As I made my way through the forest and into the field, I found the rest of it. A full ghillie suit. Cheap, but a ghillie suit nonetheless. Abandoned by whoever had been wearing it. I installed sensor lights that same day. Bright ones. Every time they're activated in the night, I can't help but feel a flash of vague panic that gnaws at my gut. I think I'll set up a camera soon too. So this happened to me in July of this year. Just to give context of where I was, to discount any of the possible wildlife explanations. At the time, I lived in the Midwest in a suburban area, fairly populated near a very populated city. There was nowhere that could be considered rural within at least a 40-mile radius. So anyways, to start my experience, it was late at night, and I was hanging out with my golden retriever, Leo, who was just turning a year old in a couple of weeks at the time. I was just watching YouTube in my room while he lay on the floor next to me. It was about 12:30 a.m. and I was ready for bed, so I had to take him out before we both went to sleep. So I got him on his leash and we went outside. My family and I lived in a large apartment complex. The apartments have quite a few rooms and their own personal garage, but still have 8 to 10 apartments per building. So the buildings are very long and slim. Behind our building is a long strip of grass that goes out about 15 feet, then a large tree line that is about 20 feet deep and 200 feet long. Leo and I go out the front around the building to the back, as we don't have an exit to the back, because we are on the second floor and we all have our own separate entrances. We make it back to the grassy area, and I walk out into the grass with him to let him do his business. I am on my phone, not paying attention really, and we stand there for a good minute. I realize it's been a good amount of time, and notice Leo hasn't moved one bit. I turn off my phone and look at him, and realize he hadn't moved from the spot we stopped at and was looking at the other building right by the woods. He had been frozen the whole time. I pet him and he looked up at me, and when I stopped petting him, he looked straight back at the same spot. At the time, I hadn't realized he was looking at that spot the whole time, until just then, and looked over to where he was looking. My eyes were not adjusted to the darkness and only could see the shadow of the building. The only source of light was streetlights about 50 feet behind us. I looked back at him and quietly chuckled because I thought he just heard a squirrel and was all perked up. It was very cute, and I then looked back at my phone. Leo, in the corner of my eye, about 15 seconds later, flinched back as if he had been startled by something and started to whine. I looked over at the spot this time, realizing now he was scared of something he saw while we had been out there. My eyes were now adjusted to the dark. I saw what he was fixated on now. In the shadow of the building, right next to the corner of the wall in front of the tree line, about 15 feet away from me, was this creature. I could only see a black outline as it was not lit up enough, but it was massive. I know how tall the building was relative to me, and when it was standing right next to the building, it was about 5 feet tall. That wouldn't be very tall if it were standing upright, but this thing was on all fours. The best way I can describe how it looked is when a bulldog snarls and kind of flexes its front legs when trying to intimidate someone, but was scaled up to be 5 feet tall and had more muscle. There is no way that this was any creature in the Midwest. The only creature that is remotely close to that size is a black bear, but that's way up north, nowhere near where I am in the southeastern part of my state. There are no wooded areas for a bear to live in anyways, as stated in the beginning. Plus, the max height of a black bear on all fours is about 3 feet, and it's not very broad. This thing surpassed that by a long shot, and was extremely broad. I jumped back in fear, and was just frozen after that for a solid 30 seconds, just staring at it. I then backed away slowly, keeping my eye on it the whole time. Leo then began to growl and snarl at it, and we rounded the corner. Leo has never acted aggressive like that ever before, so this just made me even more terrified. I then peeked around a corner no more than a second later, and it was gone. No noise, no shadow swiftly moving behind the building. Just gone. There's no way something could have moved behind the building that fast without a sound, especially at that size. This freaked me out even more, and I sprinted back inside to the apartment. I would really like to think that I was hallucinating this and was just tired, but it was clear as day, even during the night.